is in the section for variables and data types. And the reason is it's very important to be able to display the value of variables as output. And format specifier basically help you do that. So I want to run through some examples of showing you how you can display the value of variables, and we are going to use format specifier to specify the type of data that we want to display. So format specifiers are used when displaying variables as output. You can also use them for converting data, but we are just going to talk about using this output for now. They specify the type of the data of the variable that you want to display. So for example, if you declare an integer named sum and it's equal to 89 and you want to display that variable sum, what you would do is you would use the printf function. And it looks kind of weird, right? The thing that you should really notice in this printf is there's a percent symbol there. And the way that you are going to be able to identify a format specifier is through that percent symbol. So format specifier are exactly what the name implies in that. They specify the format of data and basically how something should be formatted or displayed. So in this example, printf is a function that we have been using to display output. We know how to do this because we had many different examples, and a challenge, printf is a function. A function, again, we have not talked about functions in detail, but a general concept of a function just means that it's a group of code. It's a way of organizing things like an algorithm could be inside of a function. Function has specific syntax in C, in that you see parentheses with it. So we know the main function is the way that you enter a program. So we are familiar with at least one function for the main. We have also seen learning about printf because that's one of the functions that you use to display output to the console. So it's important to understand those two basic functions. We don't have to understand everything about functions up to this point. We just need to know that a function can be invoked or called to do something. And in this case, we are using the printf function to display output. And we are telling it what to display based on what's inside these parentheses. So printf is a function. It can display the output of variables. Up to this point, if we wanted to display something using printf, we just enclosed it in double quotes and we saw text go out to the screen. But what happens when you want to print out a variable? Well, when you want to print out a variable, you have to specify the type of the data for that variable that you want to print. The printf function needs that information. So if you look at printf and you are trying to analyze it, you don't know anything about functions yet. Things that should stick out to you are that, hey, it has left parenthesis and right parenthesis, there is a comma in there, there's a quotations in there. First of all, you are going to know its function because of the parentheses. And inside those parentheses are what's called function arguments. It's data that you are passing to the function that can be used. And again, it's not real important that you separate it by comma. So the first argument for the printf function is everything. Inside those double quotes, the second argument would be that variable sum. And so the first argument there represent what you want. And up to this point, we were able to display text, but what percentage symbol, percent D symbol, and that backslash n, we know the backslash n is an escape sequence. So if we try to print out that out, that's just going to print out a line feed. But what does the percent D do? Well, the percent D is basically saying that when you see the percent symbol, don't actually print out what's the next argument. So percent D is actually going to be interpolated or mapped to the variable sum. So along with the display of the character string, the enum is right after displaying the sum is percent D is going to be mapped to the variable that you want to display as well. And then backslash n is going to be interpolated as a line feed. So this is going to display the sum is the value of sum and then a line feed. Now the percent symbol tells you that it's a format specifier. The D is telling you that it's an integer. And depending on the type of that data, what's after the percent symbol is going to change. So that's what's going on with the printf function. The percent character is what's important in terms of the format specifier. It's a special character recognized by the printf statement, printf function. And what immediately follows that print symbol is going to identify the type of the data that we want to print. The type of the data that we want to print is just going to be single character like this. This is D. The data that we are going to actually print is after the comma. And so you can put many different percent symbol there to print many different types of data, and we will go through some examples. So here's an example where we are creating some variables of different types. We are creating an integer variable, a float variable, double variable, and a character variable. And we are assigning all these actual variables values. And so what you should see here in these printf examples are after the percent symbol, there's different letters. We have %I, %F, %E, %G, and %C. Again, those letters identify data types. Percent I is going to represent an integer. Percent D also represent an integer. Percent F represent a float. Percent E is actually going to represent a double. Percent G is going to represent a double as well. Just a different format. Percent C is going to represent a character variable. And then Boolean values, remember we mentioned that Boolean values are true or false, that is 0 or 1. You could see percent I there as well. So let's go through this example in code blocks. So here's our familiar example, our main function, our main program. And I'm just going to copy and paste in the values that we had for our little program that had different data types. So this is the examples from this slide. Again, I have pretty big font here, so hopefully everyone can see it in this video. On all we are going in this example is we are declaring some variables, so of different data types. So in line 12, we are declaring a variable of type int named integer, variable integer var, and we are assigning it 100. So we are initializing and declaring variables. We have an int on line 13, we have a float line 14, we have a double on line 15, and we have a character. We know that it's a character because it is inside a single quote. And then our boolean, which we can just use underscore boolean again, is what was defined in the C99 standard format, but we can just use boolean. I think that would be better. And then we can set that to 0. The printf function that's displaying the output, and the first argument inside the double quote is going to be what's displayed to the screen. The second argument is going to be mapped to what's the format specifier percent %I. And then the backslash n is just printing new lines because that's an escape sequence. So if I were to run this code, first I need to compile, and let's see. It looks like we have an extra character somewhere. When you are in code blocks, one of the ways that you can identify errors is this color coding. It's also in VS Code. VS Code also suggesting us a particular solution for that problem. It will tell you. So if you see things that are highlighted, it's usually showing the errors. These things contain these lines contain the errors, or error is in the color coding. So if you see things that are highlighted, it's usually a good indication that something weird is going on. So now we save it, we build it, we do have unnamed type boolean. So we are just going to use underscore boolean for now. And we still have some bad characters here. And we know that because the printf is actually not, again, I should have copied and pasted this. I copied and pasted this from the PowerPoint slides. And it basically added all these weird characters. So now I have to make sure they are not there. And now we have no errors. But sure, why I was not able to use boolean? Because it's a C++. It's from C++. So boolean is actually for C, not defined as an alias, as a name. I think until the C11 standard. Well, you have to use underscore boolean. So let's run this thing. And what we will notice is outputs. It's going to be displaying the output. So you will notice again that it's displaying integer values. So it displays whatever in quotes, and then percent I gets mapped to whatever the values is of integer variable, which is 100. So percent f is going to get mapped to floating variable and vice versa. What you see output is integer variable equals 100, floating variable equals 331.79, and so forth. Double variable and double var, and you will notice the formats little different depending on the specifier you provide. You also notice Boolean variable is equal to 0 because Boolean is actually an integer. Other thing that you should notice is in line, the floating variable is actually printed out as 331.79009, but we assigned it as 331.79. And the reason it's displayed with more precision is because of the specifier f. And depending on what machines you are in, because it's machine independent, it may display differently. And so this is just an example of how you can use format specifier. And also, if you wanted to print more than one variable on the same lines, so we could actually put it as that we want in here, anything else inside in here, and then we could do another things, percent d, let's print out the floating variable. We could do percent f, and then all we need to do if we want to print out two variables, we had another comma and we say floating variable. So You see, what I did here is I wanted to print out two variables on one statement, one print statement. So I added another format specifier, and then I just added another comma to specify the variable that I want to print. So you can put as many format specifier in between the double quotes, and those are going to get mapped to whatever after the commas for each variable. And again, I wanted to talk about format specifiers because we are going to be printing out data for debugging. It's important to know how to print out variables, and these are all sorts of different format specifiers in the C programming language. I want to provide you with a little illustration of some of the ones you are basically going to use depending on the data type. But format specifier can get any more complicated. You could put a percent here and say two dot, and this will print it to two decimal points. There is all sort of nice things you can do with format specifier to format your data. But we are just going to talk about the basics, basically how you use the format specifier, specify the type of data that's going to be outputted, and then put the variable with the comma. So you can play around with this. Again, we will have an activity or a little challenge to have understand this. But this program just demonstrated some declaration, initialization of variables, and then using format specifier to display them. So let's go back to the slides and summarize some of these different format specifiers that are available in C language. Let's look at one more example related to format specifier, which is the specifier. So the width specified is where you have a number after the percent symbol that specifies the minimum field width to be printed if the characters are less than the size of the width that remain in the space. It really just has to do with precision. So this will make more sense if I show you an actual example. So this has to do with the really floating point numbers and whole numbers. Let's say we have a floating point number called x, and this is going to be equal to 3.99983, or a bunch of different decimals. We can print the width of this by specifying how far or how precise the number is. So we can do is we can say printf, and if we wanted to print %x, we usually use something like %f, and then we want to print out our float. But what we want to do instead is we want to specify, so it would look like something like this. As opposed to %f, you can actually say percent dot, then you can say something like dot 2 f. And what this is going to do, it's only going to print out 3.99, because the dot and then the number specify the width of the floating point number. So let's go ahead and build this, and then we run it. We can say we want to make sure this is x. We want to make sure that it's only print out to precision. So when we run this, you will see that it just print out 4.00. So it's rounded. But again, %2 is the specifier. Now you can change this. If you want to use 2, you can say 5, or that will print out everything and it will round it. So let's actually do 9.3, and it will print out to 5 precision. So now when we run this, you will see that 5 precision, 3.993232. So there's 5 decimal points. And so you can use the width operator for you want to provide it. So in this summary slide, it actually tells you the format specifier that you would use for printf in the third column here, printf chars. So if you want to print out a character, you use %c. If you want to print out a boolean, use %i or %u, and that will print out 0 or 1. In the const, there's also examples of what represent these data types. Sort, int should be percent and %hx and so forth. The ones that you are probably going to use a lot, int for %i or %d work with int is usually used depending on the standard. %f, you get a associated with that floats, doubles, %f, %e, %g. Each one is going to determine the precision. Long double printf. Another real popular one is %s for string, but we have not talked about strings yet, which are just a sequence of characters. But again, all these different format specifiers can be included to convert data as well as displaying data as output, and we will be doing a lot of this